Oh, this
Wait,
is
oh,
it's not on yet. I thought you
I
said
meant
we
I
were
was
ready.
ready to turn it on. Okay, now we're on.
Okay, we're back in session here at 11:16. And we're fortunate to have Nadine Thompson with us to talk about the fair housing portion of the CHIP grant. Is that correct? Okay.
If it's okay, I'm gonna stand up here. I hope that's all right. I
Anywhere
have to be
you
able
like.
to-
Absolutely.
To see my audience here. A couple of housekeeping things. If I could have everybody sign my sign-in sheet, I have to prove to the government that I actually spoke to live bodies. My name is Nadine Thompson. I'm with WSOS Community Action. I thank the commissioners for allowing me this time to come and speak to you all. The commissioners receive grant funds from the state. Okay, those states, they use those funds for various projects, things like homelessness counseling, foreclosure counseling, first-time homebuyer counseling, weatherization programs, projects throughout the county. Well, those funds that are granted from the state actually originate from federal HUD. And so one of the requirements that HUD puts on those funds is that they must do fair housing education and outreach throughout the communities. WSOS administers their CHIP grant for them, and I do the Fair Housing Commission. Basically, I just go to meetings such as this, civic organizations, Head Start parent groups, things like that, and just give a brief overview about fair housing, and then give everybody just some information, little examples and stuff like that. One other thing, you can each take one of each of those brochures, okay? Fair housing law gives all persons, especially persons in protected classes, to live wherever they can afford to live, okay? In 1965, Ohio was actually one of the first states to enact fair housing legislation. And to this day, we still have some of the strongest laws in the entire nation, okay? Federal law prohibits discrimination based on the obvious, race or color, religion, national origin, gender, disability. Now, disability can be either a physical or a mental handicap, okay? Familial status. Familial status is any family with one or more children under the age of 18. That does include pregnant women. And another group that's becoming more prevalent in our society today, grandparents raising their grandchildren. We have a lot of grandparents out there raising their grandchildren these days. They do fall into that classification. Ohio actually added 2 additional protected classes, ancestry, and believe it or not, military status. Military status is now a protected class from discrimination. The Fair Housing Act does not specifically include sexual orientation and gender identity. However, they don't include it as a prohibited basis, but a lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, sometimes referred to as LGBT, a person's experience with sexual orientation or gender identity, housing discrimination may still be covered under the Fair Housing Act. In other words, HUD passed a ruling that any entity that receives, and especially in their housing programs, that receive their funding may not discriminate against somebody based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. Okay, it's not a legal protected class, but with them making that proclamation, you know, if somebody feels that that could be happening, they could fight it. Okay. Illegal housing activity. It does include housing specifically, but it can also include in lending, mortgage lending, and insuring a home. Okay. I'll just give a couple of quick examples. You cannot refuse to sell or rent to somebody based on their color, their race, their religion, their gender. Denying based on a protected class, setting different terms, conditions, or maybe offering special privileges if they are or are not a protected class. Okay. Providing different services for one group compared to another. Falsely denying availability. There's a complex that advertises having a unit that's available, and let's say a Jew, somebody who's Jewish, goes to apply, oh, that's not available, but it really still is. Okay, that's just an example. Sometimes this is known to occur with real estate agents. Real estate agents steering a certain type of individual to a certain area in the community. We live in a very good area. We maybe receive 1 or 2 complaints a year. Those tend to be more landlord-tenant issues than fair housing issues, than discrimination issues. But that happens a lot more, you see in bigger cities sometimes. Mortgage lending, common sense stuff. After the mortgage issues going on, mortgage lenders, banks are really scrutinized a lot harder these days. They're really watched, so you don't tend to see as much of it, again, especially in a smaller community like this. Same concept, you can't refuse to make a mortgage loan or failure to provide information regarding loans or providing different information if they're Latino or white or religious or female, okay? There are some exemptions to Ohio's law. It's okay for religious, fraternal, or for-profit organizations to rent to their own members, okay? Our church has our parsonage up for rent. And it's okay for us to say, we're only going to rent to a member of our church, so long as we don't discriminate against somebody becoming a member of the church, okay? Housing for older persons may exclude families with children, but the exemptions are actually kind of narrow. For example, there's a trailer park in Fremont that houses at least one person who is 55 or older in at least 80% of its units, okay? And it adheres to a policy of being for 55 and older, okay? That's legal. Of course, you have your HUD, if HUD has determined the housing to be designed or occupied by elderly under federal, state, or local government programs. Your senior citizens housing, that's okay to do that. Disabilities, protections for those with a disability. Again, this is a physical or mental handicap and can include hearing, mobility, visual impairments, chronic alcoholism. Chronic alcoholism is a disability. AIDS or AIDS-related complex is a disability. I don't know the medical side of all of that, but it is listed as a disability. A landlord may not refuse to let a tenant make reasonable modifications to a unit or dwelling to allow that person better access, okay, at their own expense. They don't have to pay to do it, but if somebody becomes disabled and shows documentation that they're disabled, they have to allow them to do that. A real common one is handicap showers, handicap bars, ramps, of course, things like that. Refuse to make reasonable accommodations in rules or policies. A common one there is offering them a handicap parking spot. One that is becoming more prevalent these days also, service animals. In 5 years, I've had 3 complaints about service animals, not in Seneca County. In the neighboring county, Huron County, but if a landlord has a no pet policy and the potential tenant has documentation showing that they must have that, they need that animal to live their daily lives, seeing eye dogs, hearing dogs, that was one of my complaints, a hearing dog, okay? If they have a no pet policy, it's waived. If they charge a pet fee or a pet deposit, it's waived, okay? There was even a report of somebody who won a case with a miniature horse. That was a lie. Yes. Yes. So, of course, all new multi-unit construction after March of '91, you know, that's when the ADA rights really became, and that it becomes moot. They're all required to do that anyway. I'm going to leave you with a few discrimination facts. Landlords, it is okay for landlords to be very selective in who they rent their properties to, okay? So long as they use the same set of criteria for everybody and it's not discriminated based on, you know, race, color, gender, religion, things like that. Landlords cannot maintain any quotas regarding a certain type of people. A landlord can't say, well, I don't refuse to rent to Muslims. We have one that we put in the back corner. I'm not going to rent anymore, but okay, that's a quota. Important note there. That's another one that's becoming more prevalent and being discriminated against. Since 9/11, people are scared. You know, oh, are they terrorists? You know, oh, they're Muslims, you know. Muslims are actually starting to be more discriminated against these days. It's a religion. Can't do it. It's illegal to advertise in a certain way that suggests a preference for a certain type of individual, okay? You can't say no women with children, no single moms, no women, it has to be equal for everybody. Now, an exception there is if I'm, an 85-year-old lady and I want to rent one of my rooms out in my house, I can say the type of person I want because I'm renting my own dwelling where I'm living. Nationally, disability-related complaints are as common as those related to race. I want to say that again. Disability complaints are now just as common as race complaints. One of the things being our baby boomers are now getting up there in age. Okay? They're struggling with mobility. Okay? Housing inspectors do expect, housing experts, do expect that disability-related, as our baby boomers get up there, disability-related complaints will rise. Got a couple minutes. There's this report that was done. It was done by Miami University of Oxford, and they did a study basically to determine what direction our disabled population is going to be by the year 2050. Okay, so between 2015 and 2050, that's going to be over the next 35 years. Okay, the older population will start a steady and significant increase. Between 2015 and 2050, the older population in Ohio will nearly double, growing from 1.7 million to 2.9 million. Now, this is projections based on their study, okay? The proportion of women in the older population increases by age, okay? By the year 2050, 56% of all older people in Ohio will be female. The number of older people with severe disability means unable to take care of yourself, okay, will more than double, increasing from less than 200,000 in 2015 to 450,000 people in 2050 who will be severely disabled. Older women are more likely than older men to live alone and have inadequate economic resources. Although the majority of people reaching age 65 will continue to live healthy lives, productive lives, a considerable number of people will grapple with disability and be unable to care for themselves. So again, as our baby boomers are up there, I'm the baby of the baby boomers. I was born in the early 60s. My dad, however, is an elder of the baby boomers. He's struggling with mobility, and they've had to put a ramp at his house, and so something to think about for the future, especially caring for our elderly as our elderly are getting up there. So that's really all I have. Does anybody have any questions? Then I did my job right.
Thank you, Nadine, for presenting this. I gave her such a hard time last time about everybody being a victim. I said I'd be nice.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. The question was once raised to me: are we, by doing this, are we opening a can of worms? And I'll be the first to say, in these days, we live in a sue-happy world out there. Okay. It's very easy for someone to cry, oh, it's discrimination, it's discrimination. The whole purpose of this program is education. Getting education out there, getting information out there, the brochures that are in here. It's really up to the Civil Rights Commission to make that determination. People may cry discrimination, but we report it to the Civil Rights. They then investigate it, and then they make that decision.
Is it too late to ask a question?
No.
An alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
If a person's an alcoholic, can the utility companies turn their utilities off?
First of all,
So
I'm not
I
an
know there's a lot
attorney,
of,
so I'm not
I
going
know
to say
there's a lot of
that.
questions there.
Yeah. My initial response would be no. A utility company I would assume, has to turn it off because they're not payment.
Well, you assume that, yeah.
Yes, we're assuming that. But
Yes.
again, I'm not an attorney, so I don't. None of my answers are professed to be law, but I can give an opinion there.
That's a good question, I know it is.
Yeah.
I know what happened.
Yeah, I can't envision that a utility company can turn somebody's utilities off.
Well, I think
just
he's saying
because-
based on non-payment.
Yeah, based on
If it's
that.
non-payment.
Are they a
could
protected class? They wouldn't get it turned off, I guess is what he's.
And I
They
don't wanna go
protected
into,
class.
I don't wanna go into
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah, no, I totally
That's the
understand
end
what
of
you
the
mean.
And the
question.
thing is, does the utility company know the person's an alcoholic?
Right, right. That'd be a question for the civil rights.
Right.
Do we need to sign your sign-in sheet too, because it didn't come this
Oh,
way?
sure, absolutely.
And part of the, us receiving the CHIP grant, the fair housing grant is a portion of that. So
Correct.
we receive the fair housing as a part of the CHIP, is that correct?
Correct, yes. Some of the monies that is received under the CHIP grant and the formula grant also, there's a formula grant also that they receive. A certain portion of that is allotted for, specifically for, doing trainings like this, to getting education and information out there. The brochures that you had, that I gave you are, especially the tenant landlord one is a real popular one. It really lists the Ohio Revised Code specifically in there. It tells both what a landlord can do and what a tenant can do. But it also has numbers, that's the big thing, getting information out there, numbers where people can call. You know, that could be my grandma someday.
That came with
You know,
it.
that could be my kids one day.
Travis
And they don't know where to go. What do I do? Well, these brochures then help give that information out, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
For letting me to speak.
Thank you.
And we will follow that with the equally eloquent Don Corley.
Very eloquent now.
Not too sure about that, but I'm at the front edge of the baby boom. I'm going to circulate another sign in. This is for our public hearing, so if you will please sign and pass that along, I would appreciate it. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
We are now going to conduct a public hearing related to Seneca County's pending application to the state of Ohio for funding under the Community Housing Improvement Program, or CHIP. HUD, federal HUD, provides resources to communities for certain housing programs. In the case of rural communities, including Seneca County, the county does not receive those funds directly from HUD, but must access them through the state of Ohio. There was a public hearing held a little bit earlier. I think Joe Griffith from Regional Planning conducted that, which was an overall look at some of the resources available to the county under the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. This hearing is specific to one application that the county is going to file for housing funds. It includes the Community Development Block Grant and the Federal Home Program, as well as the Ohio Housing Trust Fund money. The state of Ohio has a pool of funds available to communities. It is not guaranteed. It is a competitive application. And in fact, this year will be the most competitive year on record since the CHIP program began in 1994. There was a 37% cut nationally in home funds. There's been cumulative cuts of 13 or 14% to Community Development Block Grant. And that's before sequestration, which when we had our Housing Advisory Committee meeting, I optimistically said we're not going to see sequestration. Even the people in Washington can get it together. And I was wrong. So there will be an additional approximately 5.1% cut to all resources. The state was predicting 100 applications from communities who are eligible for the CHIP program this year, with a maximum of 50 to be funded. That'll probably now decline by several additional communities. So it will be very competitive. What I'm going to describe to you is what the Seneca County Housing Advisory Committee has recommended goes into the county's application. We convene a group of local folks who are involved in government, in services, in affordable housing, realtors, bankers, service providers. And we look at what are the needs out there relative to particularly households below 80% of median income, and which of the CHIP eligible activities would appear to be a priority and should we put into our application. Let me explain that Seneca County's application is for those portions of the county outside of the city limits of Tiffin and Fostoria. They do their own thing. They both applied last year and were successful, so we're in the middle of those programs now. This would be for the balance of the county. We are currently in the middle of a program for Seneca County that began in 2011, will run to the end of October this year. We received $500,000 for that program. This year, because of the reduction in funds, the state has reduced the maximum request to $400,000. Things have tightened up. Here are the activities that our Housing Advisory Committee has recommended we put into the application. And this will total up to $400,000. From the home side, private housing rehabilitation, $202,000. From the CDBG side, home repair, $125,000. And note some of that may be, the state can elect to substitute Ohio Housing Trust funds for home repair activities. So it could be a combination of CDBG and trust funds. Emergency monthly housing payments, $15,000. Public service homeless prevention counseling, $10,000. Administration and fair housing, for things like Nadine just did. She will do a series of those around the county. $48,000, that's combined CDBG and home. Here's a little bit of description of the activities. Private owner rehab, $202,000 would rehab a minimum of 5 units. Is for owner occupied housing where the household income is below 80% of median income. The maximum assistance to a particular household is $46,000. And basically, we inspect properties for eligible households and determine what systems in the house fail to meet the state's residential rehabilitation standards. And we prepare specifications, assist the homeowner in getting bids from participating contractors, and then oversee the process of repairing or replacing those systems that were judged to be deficient. And that, as I mentioned, that is a home-funded activity. Home repair, CDBG and/or trust funds, $125,000 for a minimum of 12 units. There we're typically looking at one system. It may be a health or safety problem. It may be a serious structural problem that is threatening the integrity of the homes. They have seriously deficient roof, for example. We can go up to $12,000 per household, and those are provided as a grant to homeowners below 65% of median income. The homeowners below 50%, they could qualify to receive that assistance from the trust fund if the state gives us trust fund monies as part of that $125,000. We can go higher than our $12,000 limit. If we have someone who needs a septic tank replaced, you can go as high as $24,000. Some of the new standards, there are certain cases where septic systems now are much more expensive than they were in the past, so the state allows a higher limit if you're replacing a septic system. Emergency monthly housing payments, excuse me, $15,000. HUD's measurable outcome for providing such emergency assistance is preventing homelessness. So let us say we have a family who's in default on their house payment, or a renter that is in default on their rent. They're in danger of either being foreclosed on or evicted. In certain circumstances, we can provide them up to 3 months worth of payments to help keep them in their home. We have a counselor, and that's why we ask for another $8,000 in counseling services, who works with applicants under that program to determine if they appear to be an appropriate recipient of those funds. And one of the things they're looking at is it likely that they can sustain their current situation if we help them get caught up? So for example, we have somebody maybe who was laid off for 3 months, they got behind in their obligations, but they're now working again and they would appear to have sufficient income if we get them caught up, that they can keep current on their rent or their house payment. Someone else maybe lost their job and had $30,000 income before, and now they have a $5,000 income. Even with our help, they're not going to be able to sustain a mortgage payment, so we would look for some other resource to try and help them out of their situation. Okay, so, and I misspoke on the counseling, it's not $8,000, it's $10,000. And that would assist a minimum of 20 households. So, there's our mix of proposed resources: rehab, home repairs, emergency monthly housing payments, and public service homeowner preservation counseling, plus fair housing and administration. So total $400,000 to be requested. The application is due to the state of Ohio by April 5th. And sometime in probably July, the state will have waded through 100+ applications, scored them, and announced their decision. And we're hopeful we can be funded, but it's going to be a little bit tougher than in the past.
Our current grant ends October 1.
October 31st.
October 31st.
So there's a little bit of there's a couple months overlap if you fund it on a 2-year cycle and then another 2-year cycle. Questions, comments? We have a couple members of our HAC committee here. Joe was representing the county. We had commissioners sat in for all or a portion of it. And Phyllis Putnam was representing Metro Housing and Mental Health Association. So I don't know if any of you had comments about our planning process. Okay. Then we will we'll proceed and get the application together for your signature.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping us on the timeline there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do want to get this grant if we can.
Okay.
Any other public comment? Anything else from the board before we adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned as of 11:42.